So we are moving to our next session, which is a book launch of Karen Armstrong's Sacred Nature. I would leave the stage with Amin Hashwani, who will be the moderator for this session.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
But it is huge and
Much more than in England, I'll say.
it's good in a way.
Oh, it is. I get used to just.
Are you comfortable or would you want me to?
No, this is fine. I'm going to stand up. It's not this. Yeah.
Can I open this?
Yeah, I just have.
Oh, okay. So we can start in 30 seconds. Okay, good evening, everyone. Can we have a bit of silence, please? Thank you. Hi. Okay, so there's this saying that the young speak about the future because they do not have a past, and the old speak about the past because they have no future. Karen Armstrong, in her genius ways, links the past with the future. In all her writings of history and religion, eventually there is always a call for action going forward. Action that is urgent, action that is impactful, and action that is equitable. I feel if Karen had not been a religious historian, she would have probably been an author of an action-packed bestsellers. And that, in my opinion, is quite unique in my association of knowing Karen for almost 2 decades now. She is a woman of action. All right. Please don't get deceived of just being a scholarly religious historian. Even at this age, mashallah, she is all over the world. And what better subject than climate change to apply her skills at? We care about things through our emotions, through our connections, through our relationship. and not through our rationalities, through our logic, or even our knowledge. We need to emotively connect with issues in a meaningful way for them to really move the needle. Karen's book, Sacred Nature, does exactly that. It helps us to think individually and collectively about this existential issue, climate change. And it baffles me how we've not been able to move the needle on the subject so far, despite of every successive climate change annual reports coming in that, guys, things are a lot worse than what we had thought before. And it's not about some future generation, but it's about our children and our grandchildren. And yet, we are failing miserably. We have failed and we continue to fail miserably. Pakistan, as we all know, went through floods where 1/3 of the country was immersed. And that was primarily due to the monsoon rains, that it was like an ocean falling from the sky. What a lot of us still do not know, that outside the two polar regions, Pakistan is the country that holds the most amount of glaciers and glacial ice in the world. Okay, and you can imagine as the temperatures are going up, and with the highest population growth rate in the world, and with a country with polycrisis, be it economic, social, political, the black swan event would be unimaginable disaster for 230 million people. So for Pakistan, it is something that is an existential crisis, the climate change. On Karen, I just want to say she has visited Pakistan several times. And sometimes, you know, someone would stand up and say, it is the best Friday khutbah I have heard in my life, all right? And a friend of mine out of Boston says, hey, hang on, I mean, this lady, she's a nun, ex-nun from Western country, coming to Pakistan and teaching and telling you guys about Islam of a country that is 97% Muslims. How does she do that? And I just say, because she is Karen Armstrong. And with that, Karen, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Amin. Nature, the environment, these are major problems for us today. And interestingly, nearly all our religions speak to them, and yet we're not hearing the religious voice at all. And we need to act urgently because things are getting worse and worse every day. Way back in the Middle Ages, the West was very different from the other religious traditions, including Islam, including Greek Orthodox Christianity. It was not very interested in nature. It was more exclusively interested in history and in Jesus and his life and work. And when these Christians from the West arrived in Palestine, in the Holy Land, in about the 12th, 13th, 14th centuries, they would fall on their knees and kiss the ground and grasp the soil and say, this is the holy earth, this is the holy soil. And they would take parts of it home to them when they went back to Europe. And the Greek Orthodox priests would look at them in astonishment and say, what on earth's the matter with them? Don't they understand that all land is holy? And we in the West, we didn't understand that. And I think, most frankly, most of the religions are not really taking it seriously today. We are in a real climate change catastrophe. and the religions should be playing a major role, are not doing so, and yet the tradition is so very strong. For the Greek Orthodox, who were so astonished at watching the Christians doing this strange thing, they had quite a different view. Nature was very, very crucial to them, because before Christianity came to Greece, the goddess Artemis, goddess of nature, was one of the major deities that was devised in the Greek world. And one of the temple was built to her in Ephesus, which was one of the great wonders, 7 wonders of the world. And Artemis, the goddess, she was present in every leaf, every blade of grass, every flower, which showing that nature is imbued with sacrality, with utter holiness. And the same is true of Islam. Islam, it has an extraordinarily strong sense of nature being second in revelation to the Quran. And that's really amazing when you think that when the Prophet, peace be upon him, received the Quran, he was in what is now Saudi Arabia, in horrible climatic conditions, so horrible in those days that there was simply not enough food for everybody to go round. And so they would have to fight one another and take food away from one another, and because most of them were dying or in severe malnutrition. You'd think the last thing they'd want to do was see the divine in nature, and yet you have those wonderful paeans in the Quran. I'm not going to attempt to read them to you because it should be in Arabic, of course, and it should be chanted. But you must all have been aware of these wonderful revelations of nature. When the Jesuits from Europe in the 17th century went to China as missionaries, they became very great friends with the Confucians there. They dressed like Confucians, they discussed philosophy with him, they enjoyed it all very much. And the Chinese were fascinated by them, and they were fascinated by the new science that was appearing in Europe. Copernicus, for example, the fact that the Earth was round, and that there were various very new Galileo's ideas. Now, these had caused an awful rumpus in Europe. The church had been very angry about this because it seemed to clash with the Bible. But the Confucians, no, they were good scientists, and they thought this was fascinating. But, they said, there's one thing that they just don't understand. They don't understand the qi. Now, the qi is a force that is present in everything. It is a sacred force that runs through every flower, every tree, every human being, every animal, every cloud, in every drop of water. And the Confucianism is full of ecstasy about this. Same with Taoism. Rita is what they call this force. And they are conscious of it within one another, which is why they bow to one another. And the idea that it is confined to one particular little deity in the heavens and is not spread around and is not ubiquitous was absolutely astounding to them. There's a poem, a 4th century poem, which describes the essence of Rita, which is pervading everything, a holiness, a sanctity, a divinity that is present in everything. The vital essence of all things. It is this that brings them to life. It generates the 5 grains below and becomes the sacred stars above. When flowing amid the heavens and the earth, we call it ghostly and numinous. When stored within the chests of human beings, we call them sages. All people are my brothers and sisters, says one great Confucian epic. All people are my brothers and sisters, and all the things of nature are my companions. Something that we've really lost, that sense of sacrality in the modern world. We don't think of the sacred like that. We see the world as a sort of toy, a source for us to foster our own interests and come to our own riches, but we haven't cultivated this sense of sacrality. And as a result, we are in the terrible mess that we are in today. Now, I want to go back. One of the people who helped British people to enter into this view of religion and the nature was the poet Wordsworth, 19th century poet. And he said that he had learned to look on nature. As a young boy, he'd been intoxicated by it. He lived in the Lake District, which is an extremely beautiful part of England. And he would go almost wild with joy and the ecstasy of nature. But that faded. As he grew older, that early ecstasy died upon him. Is the problem? Okay. All right. All right. Good. Right. Wordsworth. And in his great poem, Tintern Abbey, he shows how he learned to look at nature differently, that he deliberately cultivated a different kind of mindset, and which we should do as well somehow in our modern world. He said, I've learned to look on nature, not as it when I was within a boy, as a boy, but hearing oftentimes the still sad music of humanity, nor harsh, nor grating, though of ample power to chasten and subdue. And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man. A motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things. Now, this is just really what the Chinese meant when they talked about the Qi and the Brahman, and he had learned to do this, learned to look at nature in a different way, in a sense that we have to do ourselves. It's not enough just to be careful about not messing up with the environment, and we have to make ourselves aware of the sacrality of nature. That is why, in the ancient world, people weren't very interested in gods. They were rather secondary. For thousands of years before civilization, people revered nature because they knew their lives depended upon it. Our lives still depend upon it, but we think we've mastered it in some way. We think that we are in charge and we've learned how to cope, and obviously we haven't. So how can we somehow recover that sense of sacrality? As Wordsworth did, he learned how to do it. One of the ways is something called quiet sitting. It's a Chinese thing. you just sit very comfortably, and today the Chinese would tell you, put away your mobile phones. I know that's a great painful, but just try and pluck up your courage and do it. Put and sit and listen and look. Listen to all the sounds of the birds. Listen to the creaking in the trees. Watch the tiny little insects, the birds, the caterpillars. Just sit. Don't have to have powerful, wonderful ideas or recite poems or something. Just sit quietly and open your mind and heart to nature. I think if we all did that, try to do that, just 10 minutes every day, we could start to change our view of nature. Because simply just telling us to recycle and etc. is obviously not working. We've got to have that love and passion for the natural world, which we've sadly lost. As one of the Chinese sages has it like this: "Heaven is my father, and earth is my mother. Therefore, that which fills the universe I regard as my body, and that which directs the universe I consider as my nature. All people are my brothers and sisters, and all the things of nature are my companions." Now, we don't think of companions in this way. We think of them just as conveniences for us, things that we can use, cook, manipulate, and the results have been disastrous. What we need to do is just 10 minutes a day, quiet sitting, opening your mind and heart to nature, and getting reacquainted with it. Another great thing that they did in the ancient world was sacrifice. Now, we regard sacrifice as terribly cruel, and it was about taking some poor dear animal and cutting it up and killing it. But actually, no, it wasn't like that at all. The word sacrifice is formed of two Latin words, sacrum and facere. Facere, to make, sacrum, holy, to make holy. And so when people were sacrificing, they weren't burning up animals and killing kids or sheep. No, they were sacralizing nature, making a great point of seeing its sacrality and bringing it to light. Something that we should do day by day, hour by hour. Watching, realizing that these things, that every little tree or bird or bud on the tree or flower is sacred. But that means that we have to put ourselves to one side. Kenosis, the Greek word for emptying. And that's what we should be doing, in emptying ourselves of all our ambitions and plans for nature at several hours of the day, and having us, as it were, a blank slate, emptying ourselves of our own precious needs and desires and passions and wants, and looking seriously at nature, realizing that our lives depend upon it. And that depends very much on a Greek word, it's called kenosis, which means emptying. St. Paul said of Jesus that he had emptied himself and taken up the likeness of a human being, and had taken on a life of the poor. We are all so full of ourselves most of the time. We're preoccupied with our own problems, our own passions, our own desires. And yet, in order to experience divinity, we have to empty ourselves of our self-obsession and egotism. And again, a few hours a day, every day can help. And that's clear. You know, the book of Genesis doesn't help us with that in the Christian world, really. Because the opening chapters just has God up in the heavens making heaven and earth, and he's in charge, and that's the end of it. He makes the people, the Jews in Babylonia who composed that opening chapter were really, they were in Babylonia, they were prisoners of war, and they hated the way the Babylonians had all these hundreds of gods, which they were devoutly carried through the streets several times a year and worshipped in their temples. And what the Jewish exiles are saying, we don't have to do all this business with our God, and our God is only one and the same. It is only just one God, not a lot. And he just brought the whole world into being by saying a few words. But this is not how other religions have seen religion, seen the creation. Not at all. And somehow, and it's certainly not how the Quran says it. It's very extraordinary, I think, that the Quran should be so passionate about nature when they were living in this terrible climate, with half-starved. Most of them were suffering most of the time from malnutrition. And yet there they were, praising nature. In China, the Tao is the way things are. It is what makes everything the way it is. It's, again, an invisible force that runs through all things, rolls through all things, and makes everything sacred. Here's what one poem says: it gives them life, yet claims no possession. It benefits them, yet exacts no gratitude. It is the steward, yet exercises no authority. Such is called the mysterious virtue, the Di. So if a sacred person, therefore, must put himself, they say, in the background, instead of putting ourselves in front and concentrating on our thoughts about nature and our anxieties about the natural world and the environment and our economies, we have to put ourselves to one side. And that's not easy because we are all egotists. And we put ourselves first, whereas the religions are constantly telling us to get rid of that ego. That's what you do every time you prostrate yourselves 5 times a day, to remind yourselves that we are really nothing, that we are frail people, not masters of the universe. Now, Islam, of course, means surrender, a surrender of the ego. And it's like yoga, which is supposed to be a dismantling of self. And the point is, that's why all the world religions have evolved what we call the golden rule. Never treat others as you would not like to be treated yourself. This requires you to look into your own heart, discover what gives you pain, and then refuse under any circumstance whatsoever to inflict that pain on anybody else. Do not impose on others, said Confucius, what you yourself do not desire. And that runs through all the great world religions. And the golden rule is essential for us if we want to save the planet. We've got to stop putting ourselves and our own wants first. There's a really rather wonderful poem here, which says, heaven is a Chinese poem, heaven is my father, and earth is my mother. Therefore, that which fills the universe I regard as my body, and that which directs the universe I regard as my nature. All people are my brothers and sisters, and all the things of nature are my companions. My companions, not things that I can use and exploit and benefit by and sell and collect. They are there. They are companions of an equal to us. One of the ways the Chinese cultivated this sense of sacrality was quite a nice, easy one to do. You could think about it while you're quiet sitting in the garden. It's concentric circles. You start with yourself, because here you are, locked in yourself, but then move out slowly, first to the things around you, and notice how sacred they are, how amazing they are, how precious they are. Then a little further out. Go to the Buddha said, open yourself to the heavens. Think of all the people who've died before you, and the people who will come after you. And stage after stage, which means that you leave the ego behind. And once we've left the ego behind, we can serve nature correctly. When the Buddha didn't achieve enlightenment by severe meditation and going deeply into the heart of himself. He didn't do that kind of yoga. His yoga involved for a long time sending out his concentration to every single corner of the world and everything in it. First to things near at hand, and he made sure that you didn't leave that home base until you felt obliged and blessed by every single creature within it, every single person within it, every blade of grass, every bird, every tree. Then out further and further to people far away, the Buddha said, including people who are distant from us, people whom we dislike, but breaking down that ego and going further and further out of oneself, because it's ego that holds us back and keeps us stuck in oneself. But not everybody can do that. On one occasion, a group of forest people came up to the Buddha. And they say, look, we can't do this yoga stuff. We're hard workers, and we just don't know how to do it. But we like what you say, but this is just not for us. And the Buddha smiled. He said, don't worry, Calamans. He said, there's a better way we can do it. It's something that we can do. And it's this prayer. It's in the ancient, it's attributed to the Buddha. And it is one of the earliest Buddhist prayers. And it is about getting out of ego and beginning to see that everything in the world, not just every person, certainly, whoever he or she is, or whether we like them or not, whether we approve of them or not, we have to break down those habits of prejudice, egotism, and the idea that I am self, I know the best. We don't. None of us know anything at all. But you do it, and this is a sort of prayer that you could say to yourself on the bus or in the train going to work as you watch things going by, just reminding yourselves to go outside the self, leaving this ego behind as the Buddha did in meditation, and blessing every single creature on the planet. Here's the prayer. Let all beings be happy, weak or strong, of high, middle, or low estate, small or great, visible or invisible, near or far away, alive or still to be born. May they all be perfectly happy. Let nobody lie to anybody or despise any single being anywhere. May nobody wish harm to any single creature out of hatred and anger. Let us cherish all creatures as a mother her only child. May our loving thoughts fill the whole world, above, below, across, without limit. A boundless goodwill toward the whole world, unrestricted, free of hatred and enmity. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So we have about 20-25 minutes. I'm going to ask you 2 quick questions, and then we're going to open it to the audience. So, Karen, my first question about inequality and inequity. Climate change is going to make it kind of exists in our world, and climate change is going to further accentuate this whole issue. And the irony is that it'll be the poor that'll be suffering disproportionately for the sins of the rich that have exploited the thing. How do you see this in the historical context about inequality and inequity?
In the historical context, of course, we think of a stratified society with noble people and servants and various classes of people. But for the vast mass of human life, for millions of years, there was no inequality. Archaeologists are just beginning to discover this. They find, for example, whole castles built about 30,000 years ago, built by what we call Stone Age people. And in them there are graves. Some of them there are graves. And you'd expect to find kings or priests or noble people in there. No, what you find are a lot of disabled people, people damaged in some way, all dressed in the most beautiful garments. Some of them are children, some of them are hunchbacks, or they've got no arms or legs, and they are the people who were valued. And there are some graves where people thought, well, these were probably the kings, because the people look quite normal, the corpses look quite normal. But no, some of them said, no, they may have just had something like epilepsy, which didn't worry their physique, didn't change their physique, but which, so a whole topsy-turvy way of looking at the world, and no inequality. And they worked hard at this, and we see it too among the tribal peoples today. The tribal peoples, I'm sure there are some bad tribes around, you know, don't let's all sort of sanctify them at once, but the whole ethos of tribal society is that the chief, for example, has no power whatsoever at all. He can't give any orders. He has virtually, all he can do is give people presents. So he's practically penniless at the end of his term. What the tribesmen will do, if they see one of their people getting above himself, they will bring him down to earth hard and make him realize that he is nothing, that we're all equal. Now, we used to do that before the axial age, which is when we built stratified societies. And for the first time, you had classes of nobility, slaves, servants, women who were way down the scale. And that came in. We don't know how it happened. It started in the first early civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia, and then later on in China and India too, and Greece. We don't know how it happened, but we do know that this equity they couldn't do that anymore. Once you've got a ruling class and you've got kings and you've got servants and you've got poor people and slaves, and that's what has happened to us, and we can't sort of get beyond this because that's all we've known. But it's very unlike what went before. And a lot, I think, of the world religions, if you think of people like the Buddha, were trying to get back to that. They would go around begging for their food, for example, and sleeping rough, trying, as it were, to get back to that original ethos. Now, we can't do that, but what we can do is start trying to be a bit more equitable, because we are always priding ourselves on how wonderfully equal we are. You know, the land of the free, said the Americans, with vast inequality and hideous numbers of people. At present, a friend of mine's just come back from California, horrible numbers of people, desperate people, sleeping in the streets these days. And is anybody bothering about it? No. So we're going from bad to worse in a sense. And so our notions of equality means being nice to the lady who cleans our house or something. So that's a great act of inequity. But it's not. Our civilizations have done wonderful things, and I'm lucky to feel lucky to have been privileged by some of them. But we have reached this horrible impasse by massive inequity. And you see, what the tribal peoples show us is that they did this not just by saying all things that people are equal or having hymns and poems to say how equal we all are and how we love one another or how we're all the same. No, they would do it they would put themselves through difficult things to learn how to, they would put people, that's what they do in religious orders, make you feel humble, make you crawl around and kiss people's feet. Though sometimes you'd think to yourself, gosh, how good I am to be kissing people's feet. You know, that ego always creeps in.
Okay. So Karen, my next question is, there are about 7,000 languages around the world, and between 50 to 90% are expected to get extinct by the end of this century. And almost all of these languages that are endangered are indigenous and in biodiverse communities, and environment, of course, comes a lot with it. The dominance would be the commercial languages. So languages just don't help us to communicate, talk, but also it makes us think, perceive a reality, and eventually to act, right? So in this commercial lingo universe that we are, how do we reach across the aisle? And eventually it's going to be a team sport saving the climate. So how do you reach out to the young generation, to the scientists, to the capitalists, and somehow develop a common language, common purpose? How can we do that? Because just this whole thing about we're trying to save the planet, it's nonsense. It's about saving ourselves. Planet has gone through 7 billion years of volcanic eruptions and asteroids, etc., and survived. It's our species that is actually about saving ourselves, not saving the planet. How do you think we can reach out? And because what you're talking about is so fundamental in our thought process, and it is very important to reach out to the scientists, to the business people, because we cannot operate in silos.
Well, I think the only way to do it is by grassroots, frankly. Because, you know, I can write these books, other people write these books, and do the scientists take any notice, or the politicians? No. They're too busy doing their own things. Somehow, I think we've got to be a bit more creative about this. I think it's getting to the stage where there must be massive peaceful demonstrations, for example. Massive. Not yelling and screaming and waving aggressive, because that cuts the whole thing. What we need is, especially the children, who will be the ones who suffer the most. But I don't know, because it's no good speaking to these people. Because they are locked in it. And yet, every day, things are getting worse. We need to get a sense of urgency, I think. And the trouble with urgency is that it makes people angry sometimes. And then they get angry with the people who are, you know, running all these factories and things. That's no good. It's the system that is wrong. Absolutely. The whole system that is wrong. And somehow, I don't know. I wish I knew. Okay. But it won't. The thing is, it won't help unless we change our minds and hearts. It's no good saying that we just want to be equitable and nature-loving, and you know, and perhaps they do a bit of quiet sitting, as I suggested, and then go back to being the same person that you were before. Somehow we have to transform ourselves, and it's a bit late.
Absolutely. So we have about 15 minutes. So can we start with the lady in the front? She's much more passionate, apparently, and then we'll come to you. Okay. This was in reference to your earlier comment.
Karen, my name is Shafali Frost. I'm a musician. And the first time you entered my life and my being was when I was...
Can you speak a little louder?
Okay. I was 17 or 18 when I read The History of God. And the reason, and you'll understand why I'm saying that, and for the first time I realized the lack of fearlessness, because you really read that book and realize civilizations are not in conflict with each other. In fact, what was happening in one part of the world was also similarly happening in other parts of the world. And I sort of kind of operate with that fearlessness even when I do something completely new, because you realize that human beings are not attritional. They're actually creating entities and a life together. Now, we are in true sense coming together. The world is in the true sense coming together. Why is it that the knowledge of, what do you think, that the knowledge of, you know, the fact that we are all within the same framework and frame reference, whether it's the climate, whether it's religious orthodoxy, why are we actually becoming more and more dogmatic, more attritional, rather than the opposite? Because now we know very clearly that the world is not divided, it actually suffers together and thrives together.
So she like read your book, and she feels that, you know, now that we know from history that we have so much commonality and we shouldn't be feared, yet why are we not acting in that same way?
Well, I thank you. That's a very good question. And I think we don't act in this question because it's too much trouble. It's too uncomfortable. We like to feel that our little world is the best, really. That you probably think, you know, your country is far better than mine, for example. And the way we do things is right. And we don't want major change, a lot of people. We want to stay in the status quo because it's frightening what is going to be asked of us. It'll mean a massive change of life. So that's why there's sort of lethargy about it and anger about it too. People don't want to be bothered about all these things. It's too upsetting. But we've got to be upset. I spent my childhood in terror of going to hell. I thought I was a Catholic, and I thought that was where I was going to end up, and it seemed terrifying, and I didn't see any way out. But you know, people get stuck in their own little worries and religious things, and they don't open out to the rough, horrible reality that is coming our way. We just cut ourselves off from that terrible reality because we've got massively to change our lives.
Okay, thank you. The gentleman at the back, quickly.
It's not a question, it's a comment.
Can we, because we're running,
No, just
we have for
quick.
5 minutes.
No, less than 5 seconds. It's a pleasure and an honor to see you in person today and to listen to you. The book you wrote on our Prophet Muhammad changed my life. I read it. It was without bias. It was written with such love and care that I am a born-again Muslim. And, it was wonderful.
In that case, you can take 30 seconds.
Yeah, it is wonderful to see you. It is wonderful to see you in person. And you are right, religion and nature are together. When we rub our foreheads, our egos to the ground 5 times a day, whether we are cremated, whether we are buried, we go back to Mother Nature. And we are all part of this, humans, frogs, trees. And thank you for writing such a good book on Prophet Muhammad. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Okay. There's a question at the back there. This question here. Jamie, you have a question? Sorry.
Everybody told me I shouldn't read that book. I shouldn't write that book
Really?
when I was writing it at the time, because it was the time of the Salman Rushdie crisis. And they thought that I would be sort of hounded, etc. And but what I wasn't expecting was that Muslims would read it. I thought that you all knew this and didn't need. You know, I was writing for these people who were castigating Islam and didn't seem to know anything about it. And I thought, well, they'll read it. They don't touch it, of course. But it was the Muslims that read my book, and that has always been a great joy and surprise to me.
Hello. Yeah, thank you so much for such a nice session. My question is that nowadays conservationists are moving towards carbon credits and biodiversity credits. And then they're assessing the economic value that nature gave to a human being or to the other people around it. Don't you think that turning the nature into some kind of commodity is going to break our ancient bond with the natural world, which is a kind of spiritual one, but we are converting it into a materialistic bond, assigning some kind of value with it, a kind of monetary value?
Is that a comment or a question?
Question. I mean,
Can you put it in one sentence, please, if someone...
Currently, scientists are moving towards carbon credits or biodiversity credits.
Right.
They are like converting the nature into some kind of commodity to take benefits from. Right. Don't you think that it's going to break our ancient bond with nature, which is kind of spiritual one, but we are now going towards economical value of the natural world?
Correct. So that is, yeah, that is agreeable. Any other question? Let us, because we're running short on time, we'll just take a few and then we'll have, please go ahead. Sure, please.
Thank you very much for the wonderful...
We have 10 more minutes? Okay, good.
I have a short question, which is about this exploitative capitalist system.
Can you speak a bit louder?
My question is about the role of this exploitative capitalist system. How religion help us in engaging this capitalist system, making people aware of what's happening with us in terms of the exploitation of nature, natural resources, and human being denying what we are facing today. Thank you very much.
So we're living in a capitalist system which is very exploitative, right? Yeah. So what can we do about it?
I wish I knew. This is the trouble. We've been in this capitalist society for a very long time now. We're used to it. It's the way we live, and it's been very damaging. But somehow we've got to take a stand and say this can't go on. And more and more people are beginning to see this and say this, but there needs to be action. Now, we can't all just throw away our jobs and factories and everything overnight, but we can start off by perhaps not flying around in aeroplanes so much. This causes tremendous damage, and and have been endlessly flying around the world, giving lectures, so I'm a real culprit. And it's no good my flying around the world to tell people not to fly around the world, if you see what I mean. So we are sort of, but I am shocked, by the way, that I have a friend who lives near Heathrow, and the planes go over and over and over and over. And as we haven't seemed to learn during the pandemic, where we were not allowed to fly, that this is how perhaps life should be, is going to have to be in future, sad as it is. We're not thinking deeply enough. We're just carrying on with the status quo and hoping for the best, and that is a very dangerous way to go.
Karen, I've read your book, beautiful book, understood so many things. What is your concept and perception of God, or Allah, or Ishwar, Bhagwan? Is it ether, it's nature? What is it? There's no tajseem.
We cannot say what it is.
Couldn't explain what is God.
Yes.
Understood.
Yes.
Please go.
Yes. I think that this is a very good question, and it's one that we can spend our whole lives puzzling with, I think. Because I've written a book about God, a history of God, I called it, and how that changed over the centuries, and really, what the ones that got me the most were the mystics, who realized that when we talk about God, we don't know what we're talking about. As soon as we say that God is this and that, and I remember answering catechism questions on it, what is God? And quickly, in a flash, we all had to reply, God is the Supreme Spirit who alone exists of himself and is infinite in all perfections. I have to say, at 8 years old, that didn't mean much to me. But I think it's now incorrect. We don't know what God is. There is sort of mystery in life. The fact that the earth and the seasons come and go should be a miracle for us every day. The trouble with theology is it gives us answers, and it doesn't give us questions and make us stay in those questions, saying that we don't know what God is. We don't know whether there's a heaven. We don't know. There is no certainty. All we can do is try to live as productively, compassionately as possible, and seeing the sacrality in nature and in other people. That's all. That's the best we can do.
Can you speak a little bit about the logos and the mythos?
Logos and mythos. Okay, right. Logos and mythos. There are two ways of thinking about reality. One is called logos. It's the Greek. They're both Greek words, and it really is sort of words and reason. And that's the part of our brains, that thinks rationally. And we need that. I'm not suggesting we all go off into a haze. We need that for practical matters every day, and for wonderful things that we've done in terms of like medicine, for example, and what we've been able to do. Mythos is all the part of reality and life that escapes us, that we cannot quite understand, that puzzles us, that distresses us, worries us, makes us afraid. We try to account for it in some way. It's no good trying to do it rationally, because it's not, our fears and dreams and fantasies are not, will not obey logos. They have their own right, but they're a definite part of us. But we must, when we do this, what we mustn't do is start creating in our own myth a God that suits us, that is, one of ourselves writ large, with likes and likes similar to our own and who agrees with us. because that's just a big exaltation of oneself. There's a wonderful 14th century text which I read when I was a young nun, and it's still my favorite book. It's called The Cloud of Unknowing. It's written in the 14th century by an unknown monk. And he says, you're going to ask me what God is, and I have to tell you, I do not know. And he says, because of that, because I say I do not know, that is where I want you to be, in the cloud of unknowing. Not having a quick, facile answer for everything. Realizing that there are things that lie beyond our comprehension, beyond our sympathies, that shock us, terrify us, and make us marvel. But we can't always explain them. And we've become a little too used in our scientific world to giving answers to everything. But there is still mystery. I'm amazed when I wake up every morning, to be honest, that I'm still here. It seems to me astonishing that I am. And the sun rises obediently every day. We should, and you hear some of the saints marveling at this, because they make themselves realize how extraordinary our lives and survival are. We take it all for granted and tootle along, but there is mystery. And once you think you've got the answer to everything, you're lost. Einstein knew that when he discovered, made his great discoveries. God bless you. And he said that to be in the presence of something that we cannot understand is the highest form of reality. And I think we need to cultivate that sense of mystery more and realize how little and limited our existence is, day by day, hour by hour, tied up with our own little petty wants and needs. And realize when we look up at the stars, as they did in the good old days before we've started to change everything, and they saw marvels, wonder, just astonishment. And we've lost that astonishment. We need to cultivate it and realize how little we know.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'll just conclude on a quote I'd come across. It said, why should we care?